your thoughts have incredible power. What you say to yourself matters more than you can imagine. Scripture tells us this in the book of Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23, that says, be careful how you think. Why? Because your life is shaped by your thoughts. Be careful how you think, because what you think shapes your life. What you think impacts what you believe, which impacts how you feel, which impacts what you do. Your life is always moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts. Be careful how you think, because your life is shaped by your thoughts.
No matter how good of a person you are, how much faith you have, you'll never get to the place where negative thoughts don't come. Discouraging thoughts. Your dream is never going to come to pass. You'll never meet the right person. It would have happened by now. Thoughts of worry. The medical report's not good. Your child is off course. Business is slowing down. What are you going to do? The enemy's main tools are deception and lies. Your mind is the bullseye of his target. If he can control your thinking, he can control your life. You can't stop negative thoughts from coming, but here's the key. Just because a thought comes doesn't mean you have to think it. You control the doorway to your mind. You're in charge of what you give access to. That's why the scripture tells us to guard our minds. Be selective in what you allow in. If the thought is negative, discouraging, bringing worry, fear, do yourself a favor, don't let it in. It's not complicated. Don't dwell on it. Don't give it the time of day. But too often, when these negative thoughts come, we don't think twice. We just allow them access, go around worried, discouraged, intimidated. Start paying attention to what you're dwelling on. When discouraging thoughts come, nothing good is in your future. Why do you even have your hopes up? You're going to be disappointed again. Before you dwell on that, before you let it take root, ask yourself, where is this thought coming from?
Dr. Paul David Tripp, an author and a pastor that I like and respect, he said, no one is more influential in your life than you are, because no one talks to you more than you do. I like that. But what I don't like is that sadly, some of you are talking yourself into a life that you hate. Your thoughts have incredible power. The good news is that you have incredible power over your thoughts. Your thoughts are incredibly powerful. Your life is moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts. But the good news is you're not a victim of your thoughts. By the power of God, you can actually choose what you think about, and what you think about determines how you live. Your thoughts are incredibly powerful, and you have incredible power over your thoughts. If you have a presentation coming up and you're really nervous about it, and you do the presentation and you do a good job, and afterwards 5 different people say, wow, that was amazing. You crushed it. That was so powerful. I love what you did. 5 people loved it, and 1 person makes a negative comment. At the end of the day, are you thinking about the 5 positive things, or are you lamenting the 1 negative thing? If you're like me, I'm lamenting the 1 negative thing. And what happens, unfortunately, is chronic negativity, it sends us into a constant state of fight or flight. And we're actually wired this way. It's not initially bad until it becomes bad, because in any stressful situation, God actually designed our brains to release cortisol into the blood system. And that's a good thing at first. It makes us more alert. It makes us more focused. It makes us ready to deal with a problem. And it's good until it's not. When we become chronically negative, when we're stuck in an ongoing negative loop, we always feel like we're in danger. We always feel like there is a threat. Paul said it this way: the mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. What happens is, when most of what you see online is negative, and most of what your friends say is negative, and most of what you say to yourself is negative, and most of what you hear about in the news is negative. When you focus on the negative, what you're doing is you're creating negative neural pathways. When you think a thought once, it's easier to think a thought again. And when you focus on the negative and you think on the negative some more, and you hang around negative people, and you're surrounded by criticism, and you never think the best, but you always think the worst, you're creating negative neural pathways, and very literally for you, negativity becomes a habit. It's a default posture. It's that things are gonna be bad and they're gonna get worse, and you can't trust anybody, and everybody's gonna let you down, and all Christians are this, and life sucks, and it's getting worse, and my mental health is bad, and I'm never gonna get anywhere, and I'm never gonna be happy, and I'm never gonna have a ministry, and there's never gonna be anything that really matters in life. I'm always gonna be stuck here. And very literally, negativity becomes your default habit posture.
Instead of keeping your mind stayed on your problems, stayed on the news, stayed on doubt, stayed on worry, keep it stayed on what God promised you. Here's a simple principle. When a negative thought comes, erase it and replace it. It's not enough to just not think negative, because once you dismiss it, once you make that decision, I'm not dwelling on that, I'm not letting that worry in, that's good. The problem is, it'll come back in a few seconds. Once you erase the negative, replace it with a positive thought. Don't leave your mind empty. The thought comes, nothing good's in your future, dismiss it. Don't give it the time of day. Then take the next step. Father, you promised the path of the righteous, my path is getting brighter and brighter. You said my latter days will be better than my former days. When the thoughts come, this problem's too big, the opposition too strong, you'll never get past it. You can let that play and live defeated, discouraged, intimidated, or you can replace it with what God says. Father, you said when the enemy comes against me one way, you would defeat them and cause them to flee 7 different ways. And yes, this may be too big for me, but I know it's not too big for you. Or how about when these never lies come? Lies that tell you you'll never get well, never meet the right person, never get out of debt. Don't let that play in your mind. If you do, you're defeating yourself. That's keeping you from seeing God's favor. Erase it, that's the first step. Not dwelling on that anymore. Then take the next step and replace it. Father, thank you that what you started in my life, you will finish. What I'm up against is not permanent. I know this too shall pass. Breakthroughs are coming, healing is coming, freedom is coming, victory is coming. Get your mind going in the right direction, and your life will go in the right direction. You're going to draw in what you're constantly thinking about. If you're thinking can't do it thoughts, I'm not enough, this problem's too big, you're drawing in defeat. That's making you weaker. Your gifts are being pushed down. Your faith is being diminished. Why don't you try erasing and replacing? How much further will you go? How much happier will you live? How much more of God's favor will you see if you'll guard your mind? If you'll be selective in what you're dwelling on? If you'll keep it stayed on Him? If it's not positive, hopeful, encouraging, it's not from God. That's the enemy doing what he does best, trying to plant negative seeds, fearful seeds, inferior seeds. God said here in Isaiah, if you'll keep your mind stayed on me, I will keep you in perfect peace. What is your mind stayed on? What are you dwelling on throughout the day? Joel, have you watched the news? Interest rates going up, the recession, the stock market, I'm worried. Those are all valid thoughts. I'm not saying to deny reality. I'm saying be selective in what you dwell on. The right approach is, yes, there's a lot of uncertainty. I don't know how it's all going to turn out, but God, I know you're my provider. Just as you take care of the birds of the air, feed and clothe them, you're going to take care of me.
One of the most powerful illustrations of the mind with David in the Old Testament, and he shows us what to do when you are hit by, blindsided by an avalanche of negativity. We're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 30, and let me give you the context. It was a bad day. It was worse than you can possibly imagine. However bad your week was, David's was much worse. David and his troops had just come home from battle, and they tragically discovered that an enemy force had burned their homes and kidnapped their wives and their children. So you got these warriors coming home, and David thinks it can't get any worse than this. They've burned our villages, they've taken our families, and he thought it couldn't get any worse until it did, when his own men decided to turn on him and thought about stoning him. And we can read the story in scripture where it says this: when David and his men reached Ziklag, they found it destroyed by fire, and their wives and their sons and daughters taken captive. So David and his men wept aloud until they had no strength left to weep. Some of you may feel close to that right now. You're hurting so deeply, so much pain, so much anxiety, so much fear, and they wept aloud until they had no strength left to weep. And David understandably was greatly distressed because the men were talking of stoning him. Each one was bitter in spirit because of his sons and daughters. And in the middle of his worst and lowest moment, Scripture says this: but David found strength in the Lord his God. In the middle of an avalanche of negativity, he found strength in the Lord his God. Some of you, it's time to find some strength. Not in your own power, not in your own positive thinking, but in the power of a life-changing presence of God.